So I want you to picture yourself just standing in your kitchen.
Okay, I'm there.
Right. So maybe it's an anniversary or, a birthday, and the house is completely quiet. The only thing you can hear is that low, steady, um, almost invisible hum of the refrigerator.
Oh, yeah, that very specific kitchen silence.
Exactly. And you've just handed your partner this beautifully wrapped gift. You really took your time with the wrapping, you got the sharp corners, the perfect ribbon, and as they take it from you, you can literally hear the crisp crinkle of the paper.
The anticipation is building.
It really is. You're
And
just waiting for it. You're waiting for their face to light up or for that little gasp of surprise, right? You want that visual confirmation that you just absolutely nailed this gift.
right, you want the reaction.
But instead, they just give it this really quick glance and they set the box down on the granite counter without even opening it. And they just look at you and say, thanks.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that hurts.
A beat of silence passes. And right there, just right in the center of your stomach, you feel this knot pull tight.
It's an incredibly visceral feeling, isn't it? That sudden dropping sensation.
It really is.
Your
Right?
brain just immediately kicks into this threat detection mode. The internal monologue starts racing, like, did I do something wrong? Are they angry with me? Do they hate the wrapping paper?
Exactly. You just feel entirely deflated. But here is the really fascinating thing we are embarking on for today's exploration. And it's this cognitive challenge that affects, literally every human relationship we ever navigate.
It's so pervasive.
It is. Why do we so constantly and so consistently miss each other's signals? Because in that specific kitchen scenario, one person is bringing this highly visual token of affection, right? The perfectly wrapped gift.
Yeah, it's an aesthetic offering.
Right. But the other person might be standing there just completely ignoring the physical box because they're waiting to actually hear the spoken words. They want to hear, I appreciate you or I love you.
Or, a third person might not even care about the box or the spoken words. They might just want the physical warmth of a long, grounding embrace before they even think about a present.
Which is just wild to think about. We operate under this massive, invisible, and frankly kind of arrogant assumption that everyone else experiences reality in the exact same way that we do.
Oh, absolutely. We assume the world is this shared, objective, high-definition broadcast that everyone is tuned into.
Right.
But the sociolinguistic and neurological frameworks we are looking at today, they paint a completely different picture of human consciousness. Our brains are actually, they're filtering reality through entirely different sensory hardware.
Okay, sensory hardware. Explain that a bit more.
Well, every single piece of information you process about the world comes through your five senses. That's just a basic biological fact.
Yeah.
But, and this is the core of our whole audio journey today, we do not give those senses equal bandwidth. The human nervous system is bombarded by roughly 11 million bits of sensory information every single second.
I'm sorry, 11 million bits every second just standing in a quiet kitchen.
Right, 11 million. But your conscious mind, it can only process about 50 bits per second.
Wow, 50 out of 11 million.
Yeah. So to keep you from just going completely insane, your brain has to aggressively filter the world. It has to pick a primary lane. And it turns out humanity is roughly divided into three main sensory processing camps.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, so about 40% of people rely primarily on a visual filter. Another 40% lean on an auditory filter. And the remaining 20% operate through what is called a kinesthetic filter.
And kinesthetic, just for clarity, that means feeling, right?
Exactly. They process the world primarily through physical feeling, touch, and somatic sensation.
Now, I want to clarify something right up front for the listener, because I know if you're listening to this, you might be thinking, oh, this is just that old learning styles theory from middle school, where some kids need flashcards and others need an audiobook.
Right, people always jump to that.
They do. But the data we're unpacking today, it goes so much deeper than just classroom memorization techniques. This is really about the fundamental architecture of how you decode reality itself.
It touches everything.
It does. It dictates how you argue with your spouse, how you manage your anxiety, how you arrange the furniture in your living room, and yeah, why that perfectly wrapped gift fell completely flat.
Because once you grasp the mechanics of these three lenses, you really stop seeing people as stubborn or ungrateful.
Yeah.
You realize they're operating on a completely incompatible operating system.
It's a massive paradigm shift. When you stop asking, why aren't they listening to me, and start asking, which sensory channel are they actually tuned to right now, the friction in your relationships it really begins to evaporate.
It's like finding the right radio frequency.
Exactly. So let's start decoding these channels because the mechanics of how they manifest physically in the body are just wild to me. I want to start with the visuals. That's 40% of the population.
That's a huge chunk of people.
Yeah. So if you fall into this group, your brain is fundamentally an image processing machine.
Right. For a visual person, the occipital lobe, that's the visual processing center at the back of the brain, it's incredibly dominant in their daily cognitive routing. They literally see their thoughts.
See their thoughts, like a movie.
Yes. When you ask them a complex question, a full high-definition image or a short video clip flashes in their mind's eye before any words even begin to formulate.
That is so fast.
It is. And because of the sheer speed at which images can change, you see very specific physical and autonomic traits in these people. For instance, their breathing. Visuals tend to breathe quite shallowly, high up in the chest.
Okay, hold on. I definitely need to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because this feels like a bit of a leap to me. Are we really saying that the way my optic nerve processes information alters my diaphragm? Like, how does visualizing a thought actually change my respiratory rate?
It's a great question. It's not the optic nerve itself, but it's the autonomic nervous system's response to the speed of cognitive processing. Think about it mechanically. Images flash through the mind at lightning speed, vastly faster than language. To keep up with the movie playing in their head, a visual person has to speak rapidly.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they are frantically trying to describe a mental scene that is already shifting to the next scene. If you take deep, slow belly breaths, you physically cannot speak fast enough to describe the images.
Because you'd run out of air trying to talk that fast.
Exactly. The shallow high chest breathing is a mechanical adaptation. It facilitates that rapid-fire, almost breathless speech. They're physically racing to catch up with their own visual cortex.
That is absolutely fascinating. So if their brain is a movie theater, they are essentially living life with their finger permanently held down on the fast-forward button.
Pretty much, yeah.
Does that make them inherently impatient people then?
Well, impatient is the moral judgment we place on them. But cognitively, yes, they have a very low tolerance for slow information delivery. They want to see the point.
Right. Get to the point.
Exactly. If you're taking 10 minutes to tell this meandering story with a lot of tangential details, a visual person will get visibly agitated. Their eyes might dart around. They might start tapping their foot. They want you to paint the picture quickly so they can lock onto the image and move on.
And I imagine this demand for visual clarity translates into their physical environment, too. Like, they absolutely hate obscured views.
Oh, they despise them.
And I mean that metaphorically. Like, they hate a convoluted, muddy explanation, but also literally. If a visual person is driving on the highway and a massive semi-truck pulls into their lane, completely blocking their view of the horizon, it doesn't just annoy them.
No, it causes acute psychological distress.
Yeah. They feel trapped because their primary data gathering mechanism, their line of sight, has just been cut off.
Exactly. And you see this need for visual harmony in their aesthetics, too. Visual dissonance is biologically grating to them.
Give me an example of that.
They are the individuals who will spend an extra 10 minutes in the morning making sure the leather of their watch strap perfectly matches their shoes.
Oh, right.
Not necessarily out of extreme vanity, but because a mismatched color palette feels like a scratch on a TV screen to them.
Yeah.
It disrupts their processing.
If you are listening to this right now and nodding because your desk has perfectly aligned, color-coded sticky notes, you're definitely experiencing this.
Oh, for sure. The mantra for a visual is a place for everything and everything in its place.
Yes. If someone comes into their office and moves their stapler just 3 inches to the left, they notice it instantly. The mental photograph they took of their desk has been altered, and it demands their immediate attention to fix it.
Which is such a stark contrast to how the next group manages their cognitive load.
Right, the auditory folks.
Yeah. If the visual system is hogging all this bandwidth for imagery, what happens to the folks where that isn't the primary operating system? Where does their cognitive energy go? That brings us to the auditory profile.
The next 40% of the population.
Exactly.
So if the visual person's brain is a fast-forwarding movie theater, the auditory person's brain is more like a highly engaging debate club. Or maybe a symphony.
That's a great way to put it.
Because they're processing the world sequentially. Word by word, sound by sound.
Because they rely so heavily on the auditory cortex and language centers, like Wernicke's area, They process information linearly. You literally cannot listen to two songs at once and understand either of them.
Right, it just becomes noise.
Exactly.
Right.
Sound requires time, it requires sequence. So physically, their traits are the inverse of the visuals. Remember the fast, shallow breathing.
Yeah, high up in the chest.
Auditory folks typically exhibit a very rhythmic, even, mid-chest breathing pattern.
Because they're pacing themselves to the rhythm of language.
Precisely. Their voices are often beautifully modulated. While a visual might speak in a high, urgent, sometimes erratic pitch, an auditory person usually has a resonant, controlled tone.
Like a radio broadcaster.
Yes. They speak at a much more moderate pace because they're actively selecting their words. They have a constant internal monologue running. They're literally listening to how the sentence sounds in their own head before they allow it to leave their mouth.
Which explains so much about how they argue.
Oh, it does.
They are the ones who will stop you mid-fight and say, it wasn't what you said, it was the tone you used.
Every single time. An auditory person will remember the exact, subtle, passive-aggressive inflection you used in a disagreement 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
They probably couldn't tell you what shirt you were wearing, which a visual would remember perfectly, but they have an exact audio file of the pitch of your voice when you mutter the word, fine.
That is brilliant. It's all about where the brain directs its recording equipment.
Yep.
And because the visual aesthetic is entirely secondary to them, their approach to things like clothing is completely different from the color-matching visuals.
Completely. An auditory person will often dress purely to minimize cognitive load.
They wear the classic unwrinkled shirt they bought in bulk on sale, right?
Exactly. They care about the logic of the purchase. Does this material make sense for the weather? Is it cost-effective? They are not color-coding their closet. They're optimizing it, so they don't have to waste processing power on visual decisions.
I love the linguistic detail here, too. The sociolinguistics of this group are so distinct. Like, auditory people are the ones who deeply appreciate a good pun or really clever wordplay.
Yes, because language is the scaffolding of their reality.
Yeah.
A clever pun is basically a dopamine hit for the auditory cortex.
That makes so much sense.
When an auditory person reads a novel, they aren't necessarily vividly visualizing the dragon or the castle. They're listening to the rhythm of the author's prose. They hear the cadence of the dialogue.
Oh, I've noticed that.
And they talk to themselves to figure complex problems out. If you see someone alone in their car, completely animated, having a full out-loud conversation with themselves.
You are likely looking at a highly auditory processor working through their day. Okay, so we have the visual movie theater and the sequential rhythmic debate club. Now we arrive at the fringe. The remaining 20% of the population, the kinesthetic experience.
The feeling profile.
Yeah. And I have to say, of all the profiles, this one feels the most misunderstood by modern society to me. This group processes reality entirely through physical sensation, emotion, and gut instinct.
It's incredibly complex. They are navigating the world through their somatosensory cortex. They process reality through their bodies first and their minds second. Emotion and physical touch are just inextricably linked for them.
The detail that really crystallized this for me, and I really want you, the listener, to imagine this visceral feeling right now, is the clothing tag.
Oh, the tag. This is the perfect example.
Right. Imagine you buy a brand new, beautifully tailored sweater. The visual person puts it on, looks in the full-length mirror, loves the sleek silhouette, and they are absolutely thrilled.
They look great.
But let's say there is a tiny, incredibly itchy, stiff synthetic tag sewn right into the back of the neck, just aggressively scratching against the delicate skin of your spine every single time you turn your head.
For a kinesthetic person, that tag is not just a minor annoyance. It's a catastrophic disruption of their reality.
A catastrophe.
Truly. I don't care if it's a $3,000 designer garment that makes them look like a movie star. They will absolutely refuse to wear it.
Period.
Yes. The physical sensation of that scratchy tag dominates their entire sensory gating system. The brain's thalamus usually filters out the feeling of the clothes we wear so we can focus on other things, right? But for kinesthetics, that physical input gate is just wide open.
It blocks everything else out.
It blocks their ability to focus, to work, to even hold a normal conversation.
They will literally take a pair of kitchen scissors and perform emergency surgery on that sweater right there in the living room, even if it risks cutting a giant hole in the fabric.
Because comfort is paramount. It is their non-negotiable baseline.
And because they process the world through feeling, their physical demeanor is unmistakable, isn't it?
Very much so. They sit back, they sink into furniture rather than perching on the edge of it. Their movements are rounded and fluid, not sharp or angular at all.
while the visual person is leaning forward, breathing shallowly and speaking a mile a minute.
The kinesthetic person is breathing deeply right down into the belly.
And their speech is so much slower, it's often punctuated by these really long, heavy, thoughtful pauses.
Those pauses are critical to understand. They aren't slow thinkers. They are translating across a massive biological divide.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you ask a kinesthetic person a complex question, they literally have to drop down into their body. They have to access the somatic marker, the physical or emotional sensation related to that topic.
Okay.
Then they have to translate that abstract physical feeling into a cognitive concept. And finally, they have to translate that concept into spoken language.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a heavy neurological lift. It takes time.
I want to offer an analogy here, because trying to force a kinesthetic person to learn or communicate purely through rapid-fire verbal debate, it's like trying to chart a solar panel with a flashlight.
Ooh, I like that.
The energy from the flashlight is there, sure, but the hardware of the solar panel is designed to absorb broad, encompassing environmental light. The input method is just completely incompatible with the receiver.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You see this incompatibility perfectly in how they organize their physical spaces, too.
Right, going back to the desks.
Exactly.
Right.
We talked about the visual's pristine, color-coded desk. Well, a kinesthetic person organizes their space not for visual neatness, but to curate a very specific vibe. They are cultivating an ambiance.
So what does that look like?
Their desk might look like a total disaster area to a visual person.
Yeah.
Papers everywhere, coffee mugs stacked up. But their chair is incredibly ergonomic and perfectly adjusted. The lighting in the room is soft and warm.
They're optimizing for physical comfort.
Yes. They might have a smooth river stone on their desk that they reflexively rub with their thumb while they think. They have to physically interact with their environment to understand it.
Which explains why they are often the people standing just a little bit closer to you in a conversation than you might expect.
Yeah,
They naturally close that physical gap.
they really do.
They want to share your physical proximity. They might gently touch your forearm when they make an important point. They are physically reaching out to ground themselves in your shared reality.
Exactly. Or rather, I should say, it's more than just grounding. It's data collection. When they touch your arm, they are subconsciously registering muscle tension, your temperature, micro movements. It's this autonomic empathy mechanism.
That is just incredible. So we have these three distinct neurological worlds operating simultaneously in our homes and our offices.
All day, every day.
Right. And the immediate question I have, and I am sure anyone listening is wondering this right now, is how do you spot them in the wild?
You want to know their tell.
Exactly. If I'm walking into a high-stakes negotiation or I'm sitting down for a first date, I can't exactly slide a psychological questionnaire across the table and ask them to rank their sensory preferences.
No, probably not a great first date move. But the beauty of this framework is that you don't need to do that. People are leaking this information constantly. You just have to know what the subtle, involuntary tells are.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Let's start with one of the most reliable and, frankly, most fascinating indicators, the eyes, specifically conjugate eye movements, where people look when they are retrieving information.
I have to admit, when I first encountered this concept, I was highly skeptical.
Oh, a lot of people are.
Because is this that old 1980s pop psychology stuff that got debunked? The idea that if someone looks to the left, they are lying, and if they look to the right, they are telling the truth.
I am so glad you brought that up, because that specific application using eye movements as a foolproof lie detector was absolutely debunked. It is total pseudoscience.
Okay, good.
However, the underlying neurological link between memory retrieval and the oculomotor nerve is very real. It's heavily documented in cognitive science.
So how does it actually work?
When we are asked a question that requires us to access a memory or construct a complex thought, our eyes physically move. It's an involuntary reflex linking the optic nerve routing to different processing centers in the brain.
Okay, so walk me through the mechanics of it. If I ask someone a relatively neutral but specific question, say, what color was the front door of the house you lived in when you were 10 years old?
Okay, great question. If that person's primary lens is visual, their eyes will almost always dart upwards, either up and to the left or up and to the right.
Like they're looking at a ceiling.
Exactly. They are literally physically looking up to view the image on their internal mental screen. The visual cortex is retrieving the architectural image of that house, and the eyes tilt upward as if the picture is floating just above their eyebrows.
That is wild. And if their primary lens is auditory, what if I asked them, what did your favorite teacher's voice sound like when they were disappointed?
Their eyes will move horizontally. Strictly side to side. They are looking toward their ears.
Toward their ears.
Yes. They are activating the auditory cortex to pull up that specific audio file, and the cranial nerves cause a horizontal micro-movement. They are listening for the answer internally.
And the kinesthetic folks.
They look down, specifically, usually down into their right. They are physically looking away from external stimuli and looking down toward their own body.
Connecting with their gut.
Exactly. They're dropping into their somatosensory system to retrieve the emotional or physical memory. So just by asking a mildly complex question at a dinner party and casually watching their first involuntary eye movement, you can gather a massive clue about their baseline operating system.
That is something you can observe completely passively, which is amazing. But there is another tell that requires active physical contact, and it's something we do constantly in society, the handshake.
Oh, the handshake is huge.
We all know the visceral feeling of a handshake. It sets the subconscious tone for the entire interaction within milliseconds.
It really does, and it reveals their sensory priority immediately. Let's break down the grip.
Okay.
A visual person typically delivers a firm, solid, almost commanding handshake. They make direct, unbroken eye contact while they do it.
The classic assertive business handshake.
Right. For them, the handshake is a definitive, visible statement of presence. They're establishing their physical outline in your visual field.
And the auditory person.
An auditory person will give a moderate, highly standard shake. It's not overpowering, and it's not weak. It simply satisfies the socially agreed-upon mechanism for a greeting.
They're just checking the box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To be honest, they are already moving past the physical touch because they're much more interested in what words you were going to say next.
Mm-hmm.
The handshake is just a necessary prelude to the dialogue.
But the kinesthetic handshake, this is where so many cultural misunderstandings happen. It is a much softer grasp. Often they might not even engage the full palm, right? They just hold your fingers.
And this is so frequently misjudged. In aggressive Western corporate culture, a limp or soft handshake is instantly categorized as a lack of confidence or weakness or evasion.
Oh, completely.
But for a kinesthetic person, it has absolutely nothing to do with dominance or asserting a boundary. It is about sensing.
Gathering data, like you said earlier.
Yes. They are using their hand as an antenna to read your tension, your warmth, your baseline energy. They don't want to crush your hand. They want to feel it. They might even use their left hand to gently cup your elbow or your shoulder during the shake.
They crave a holistic physical connection, not a demonstration of forearm strength.
Exactly.
That reframing is so vital. It stops you from instantly writing someone off as weak just because they didn't crush your knuckles.
It changes everything.
But beyond the eyes and the hands, the most glaring, undeniable evidence of these profiles is in our vocabulary. The actual words we select subconsciously betray our internal wiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Linguists refer to these as sensory predicates. These are the specific verbs, adverbs, and adjectives that align with our dominant processing center.
We all use all of them, obviously, but under pressure, we default.
Yes, under pressure, or when explaining a complex idea, we default to our primary language.
Visuals literally use sight words. Think about the last email you sent to a colleague. Did you write, "I see what you mean"? Or, "That idea is a bit foggy. Let's look at it from a different perspective."
Right, they describe abstract situations in terms of light and color. A project is brilliant or dark. An explanation is clear or murky.
Their entire linguistic structure is built on visual metaphors. Now, an auditory person sitting in the exact same meeting, listening to the exact same pitch, will respond with sound-based predicates.
They'll nod and say, "That sounds good to me," or "We are on the same wavelength," or "That concept really resonates."
And pay attention to how they complain, too. When an auditory person is frustrated with a lack of clarity, they don't say it's foggy.
No, they say, "There's too much static," or "We're talking past each other," or "This team is totally out of harmony."
And the kinesthetic vocabulary is incredibly heavy, literally heavy. They rely on words denoting mass, texture, temperature, and pressure.
Give me some examples of that.
They'll say, "I feel like I have a solid grasp on this," or "I am feeling a bit heavy about this decision. Let's touch base next week. That vendor was really abrasive."
They take completely abstract cognitive concepts and translate them into physical, tactile realities.
It's amazing. If you simply stop planning what you're going to say next and actually listen to the specific verbs a person uses when they agree or disagree with you, they're essentially handing you the customized instruction manual on how to persuade them.
It's a cheat code for human connection.
Which brings us to the inevitable collision of these worlds. Because it's one thing to understand this in a sterile theoretical environment, but it's another to see the friction play out in the messy reality of daily life.
Oh, the collisions are where it gets real.
Let's look at some concrete examples of how these sensory lenses completely dictate our behavior. I want to start with a highly relatable domestic scenario, the big purchase.
Okay, I love this one.
Imagine buying a brand new, highly complex smart TV, or maybe assembling a massive piece of flat pack furniture.
This is a perfect crucible for observing sensory profiles in action, because assembling something complex requires intense cognitive focus. You bring this giant, intimidating cardboard box into your living room. The exact sequence of how you approach opening and assembling it is entirely dictated by your primary lens.
Okay, let's play this out. So the visual person takes a box cutter, opens the cardboard, and the very first thing they do is hunt for the instruction manual.
Yes.
But they're not looking to read the dense paragraphs of text. They are desperately looking for the exploded diagrams. They want to see the precise picture of wire A connecting to port B. They look at the physical television, look down at the diagram, and visually match the geometry of the shapes.
And their stress levels will just skyrocket if the manual only has text or if the illustrations are poorly drawn.
Oh, they'll lose their minds.
Now contrast that neuropathway with the auditory person. They might glance at the manual, but they are far more likely to ignore it if it's purely a visual schematic. Translating a 2D picture into a 3D physical action takes way too much cognitive conversion energy for them.
So what do?
They would much rather call the 1-800 customer service helpline or find a highly rated online tutorial just to hear someone verbally explain the sequence. They want to hear, first, take the red optical wire. Next, locate the square port on the bottom left. They follow sequential verbal logic.
And the kinesthetic person, I feel like I already know this one, and it honestly causes me anxiety just thinking about it.
The kinesthetic person tosses the manual entirely aside.
They don't even look at it.
No, they don't want to look at a schematic. And they certainly don't have the patience to listen to a 20-minute lecture from a customer service rep. They sit down on the living room rug, surround themselves with the plastic wrapping and the cables, and just start plugging things in.
Pure trial and error.
Pure tactile experimentation. They learn exclusively by doing. They push a cable into a port to feel if the tension is right. If it clicks, great. If the TV doesn't turn on, they unplug it and try another configuration. They have to physically manipulate the object in three-dimensional space to understand its mechanics.
I can vividly imagine a visual spouse and a kinesthetic spouse trying to set up this entertainment center together.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
The visual spouse is standing over them, holding the diagram, their breathing getting shallow, yelling, "No, it goes in the top left, just look at the picture."
While the kinesthetic spouse is on their knees, completely ignoring the paper, jamming cables in, saying, hold on, back off, let me just feel if this fits.
It is a recipe for a massive weekend-ruining argument, and it has absolutely nothing to do with one person being stupid or stubborn. It is purely a biological difference in sensory processing.
And that leads perfectly into an even more critical and emotionally charged area where these collisions happen: parenting and sibling dynamics. The insights here can honestly alter the entire trajectory of a family's emotional health.
This part of the research genuinely moved me. As a society, we are so incredibly quick to assign deep moral labels to children's behavior. We call a child mean or aggressive or spiteful based on how they act out.
But when you apply this neurological sensory framework, it recontextualizes everything.
Let's look at the mechanics of how children fight. Sibling rivalry is a universal human experience, but the physical manifestation of that conflict is entirely sensory, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
When a highly visual child is dysregulated and wants to provoke or hurt their sibling, what is their default weapon? They snatch an object. They physically remove the toy from the sibling's line of sight.
Because for a visual, removing the visual stimulus is the ultimate, most painful disruption of reality.
Exactly. They steal the tablet, or they run away with the favorite blanket.
Now look at the auditory child. They don't need to physically exert themselves to take the toy. Their weapon of choice is sound and language.
They hurl a devastatingly sarcastic insult. They taunt. They hum a high-pitched, annoying tone. They know exactly which specific words will pierce the auditory harmony of the room and inflict maximum psychological damage on their sibling.
And the kinesthetic child.
Kinesthetic child physically pokes, shoves, wrestles, or hits. They are fundamentally physical beings. When their nervous system is overwhelmed or frustrated, that internal emotional pressure translates directly and involuntarily into kinetic energy. It has to exit the body through movement.
This reflection is so vital. When we understand this neurological reality, it prevents us from permanently labeling the kinesthetic child as a bad, violent, or problem kid.
And it stops us from labeling the auditory child as cruel or manipulative.
Right. We realize they are simply reacting in their default biological language when their nervous system is flooded. If a kinesthetic child is having a total meltdown, you cannot just stand across the kitchen and yell auditory commands at them to calm down.
It won't work. That spoken logic literally cannot penetrate their physical overwhelm. You have to walk over, get down on their physical level, and perhaps place a very firm, deep pressure, calming hand on their shoulder. You have to bypass the auditory cortex and speak directly to their somatosensory system.
Conversely, if you try to forcefully, physically hug a highly visual child who is throwing a massive tantrum, they will likely thrash and fight you off.
They need visual space. They need you to physically step back so they can see your face clearly, reestablish their line of sight, and visually process that they are safe.
It is about meeting their nervous system where it currently lives. And we see this exact same disconnect profoundly in the workplace, too. We spend a third of our waking lives trapped in conference rooms with colleagues whose brains work entirely differently from ours, and we expect seamless collaboration.
The modern corporate workplace is an absolute minefield of sensory translation errors. It costs companies millions in lost productivity and turnover.
Paint that picture for us.
Imagine a highly visual manager overseeing an auditory direct report. The visual manager operates on sight and speed. They demand a pristine, color-coded, heavily formatted spreadsheet. They want to see the quarterly results condensed into a clean pie chart, and they want to absorb it in 30 seconds.
But the auditory employee doesn't process abstract data that way. To them, the pie chart feels cold, reductionist, and devoid of necessary context.
Right. They want to sit down in the manager's office and verbally discuss the strategy out loud. They need to talk through the sequential logic, debate the merits of the data, and they require extra processing time to ensure the rationale sounds perfectly logical before they execute any plan.
And what is the inevitable result? The visual manager thinks the auditory employee is wasting precious time, dragging their feet, and producing ugly, text-heavy reports.
And the auditory employee feels disrespected and thinks the manager is wildly impatient, shallow, and obsessed with superficial aesthetics over deep substance.
The friction isn't incompetence on either side. It isn't malice. It is purely a translation error.
Exactly. If the employee learns to present their findings with a clean, one-page visual executive summary to satisfy the manager's optic need.
And the manager learns to allow a dedicated 10-minute verbal debrief to satisfy the employee's auditory need.
The friction completely evaporates.
It is literally like trying to plug an AM radio receiver into an FM broadcast. The signal is strong, the content is good, but the physical hardware just isn't designed to catch that specific frequency.
Spot on.
Which makes me wonder, are we permanently stuck with our hardware? Like, are we strictly locked into just one dominant profile from birth until death? If I am a deep kinesthetic, am I biologically doomed to never appreciate a beautifully color-coded spreadsheet?
Not at all. And the neurological literature is very clear on this nuance. Thanks to neuroplasticity, everyone uses all 5 senses. We are not broken robots missing sensors.
That's a relief.
We simply have a primary preference, the path of least cognitive resistance, and usually a very strong secondary preference. It is the unique combination of these two that dictates our nuanced behavior.
So someone could be an auditory visual.
Exactly. Let's go back to our consumer behavior examples, but make it higher stakes. If an auditory visual person is buying a new car, what is their exact process?
Well, their primary lens is auditory, so the very first thing they do is evaluate the logical specifications. They want to read the data sheets, talk to the dealer at length about the engine's reliability, and ensure the price-to-value ratio is mathematically sound. They need the story of the car to make sense.
But because their secondary lens is visual, once that logic checks out and the auditory gate is passed, they suddenly care deeply about the aesthetics.
Right. They will look at the dealer and say, okay, the mileage is great, the financing is completely logical, but does it come in cherry red with black interior? They need both neurological conditions satisfied.
Compare that to a kinesthetic auditory buyer. They walk onto the lot, and the first thing they do is sit in the driver's seat. They grip the steering wheel. They feel the texture of the leather. They take it for a test drive purely to ensure the suspension feels smooth over potholes that satisfies the primary kinesthetic need.
And only then does their secondary auditory lens kick in.
Exactly. Then they ask the dealer, is the cabin noise quiet when we hit 70 on the highway?
It is a strict hierarchy of sensory needs. You cannot skip the primary to get to the secondary.
You really can't.
But here is a profound and honestly heartbreaking observation from the sociolinguistic research that really stopped me in my tracks. It's about the impact of time and the age and process on these sensory profiles. As people reach advanced age, they undergo a profound sensory regression.
It is incredibly poignant. The cognitive science suggests that as we age significantly and as cognitive decline begins to set in, the complex secondary and tertiary coping mechanisms we develop during our professional lives, they just start to fall away.
The brain no longer has the excess energy to translate between modalities.
Exactly. We strip back to our most fundamental, essential biological wiring. We revert almost entirely to our childhood primary profile.
The examples of how this plays out are so moving. Think about visiting an elderly parent or grandparent in an assisted living facility or a nursing home. If they are a fundamentally visual senior, their physical world is shrinking rapidly, but their primary emotional need is still sight.
They might say, I can still see perfectly, even if you know their hearing is failing.
To make them feel genuinely loved during a visit, you cannot just sit next to them on the couch staring at the television and talking to the wall. You must deliberately move into their line of sight. You must maintain direct, sustained eye contact.
You have to let them see your face, see your expressions, see your smile. That visual connection is their last remaining lifeline to affection.
And consider the auditory senior. They might be legally blind at this point, but they will sit in the recliner and say, tell me a story about what you did this weekend.
They don't want you to just sit silently holding their hand for an hour. Silence, to an auditory senior, feels like abandonment.
They crave the spoken word. They want to hear the rhythm of a conversation, the familiar cadence of your voice. That auditory input is how they anchor themselves to the reality that they are not alone.
And then, the kinesthetic seniors. This one is perhaps the most tender to think about. They will focus intensely, almost exclusively, on physical sensations.
They'll talk endlessly about their joint aches, their physical fatigue, or the immense, overwhelming comfort of a good, warm bowl of soup.
They might not care at all about seeing photographs of the new grandchildren on your phone, and they might not have the cognitive stamina to follow a long, winding story about your job.
They desperately need you to place a warm hand over theirs. They need the weight of a thick, soft blanket, a gentle, lingering hug. Physical touch becomes their absolute, distilled definition of love and presence in the world.
It perfectly highlights how critical this understanding is. This isn't just a corporate efficiency hack to get your boss to like your spreadsheets, and it isn't just a trick to assemble a television faster.
It's about the fundamental biological ways we care for one another at the absolute beginning of life and at the very end of it.
It really is.
It brings us to this broader, vital reflection about human potential and connection. We started this exploration with a very small, mundane, highly relatable moment. The confusion and the knot in the stomach over a misunderstood gift in a quiet kitchen.
A moment of sharp disappointment simply because someone didn't react the way our specific brain wanted them to.
But look at the incredible distance we have covered since that kitchen. That small moment of friction is actually a window into the massive, complex architecture of human perception. We are all walking around every single day, broadcasting our needs, our love, our fears, and our boundaries on a specific biologically determined frequency.
We are AM, FM, or satellite.
And we waste so much of our short lives feeling angry, frustrated, and unloved simply because the people around us are not equipped with the hardware to pick up our specific signal.
But when we learn to speak someone else's sensory language, when we actively suppress our own default setting to meet them where they are,
when we take the extra 10 minutes to draw a physical map for our visual friend who is hopelessly lost, instead of just shouting street names at them over the phone.
Or when we pause, take a deep breath, and give our kinesthetic child a tight, grounding squeeze instead of lecturing them about their behavior.
When we deliberately lower the pitch and slow the rhythm of our voice to calm an anxious auditory partner, we aren't just communicating a little bit better, we're doing something much, much deeper.
We are actively expanding our own humanity. We are stepping outside the incredibly narrow confines of our own skull. By adapting our communication to fit their biological sensory reality, we are building a tangible bridge into another person's world.
True empathy isn't just about feeling what someone else feels in your own heart. It's about doing the hard work of delivering your care in a format they are actually neurologically capable of receiving.
Delivering care in a format they can receive. That is the perfect, exact way to frame it.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. I want you to think about the one person in your life you struggle to connect with the most.
We all have one.
The one where every single conversation feels like trying to push a heavy boulder uphill, where you always seem to just miss each other in the dark. What if they aren't ignoring you? What if they aren't intentionally stubborn or cold or distant?
What if they're just on a different frequency?
What if they are simply sitting there waiting for you to translate your care into a language they can finally see, hear, or feel? Try changing your frequency this week. Just experiment with it and see what happens.